For those of you the first time, thank you for joining us. For those of you who have been here with us before, welcome back. On the previous ones, we've talked to a couple of title companies regarding quitclaim deed, which is a popular one, which we mentioned Lady Bird, but the other popular one we talked about was a trust. So instead of us kind of talking about things that we don't have our hands on daily, decided to bring along Mitzi Talon, who is a trust manager at Bank of Ann Arbor, to answer those questions for us. And of course, you're probably looking at this point and saying, our last names are the same, which is true. You've probably looked at us and realized at this point that we are twins. So she laughs every time I says that. But yes, we have been called twins in the past. So this is also not the first time that we've been on a recording together.
It's been a long time.
Yes. The other one, we won't really go into much information, except it was a very long time ago, and it was for a contest.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably the best one ever, and it will never be released to the public.
Thank God.
Without further ado, I'll introduce Mitzi Talon, trust manager, and we talked about when people place the deed of the home into a trust and what that looks like and what that means, and if that's a better option than maybe quitclaim, which some people do. Also, we get the question of, can I will my home to someone? Unfortunately, wills are not what they appear, and we'll talk about that at another discussion. But today we'll talk about trust with Mitzi Talon.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. So where do you want me to start?
So I see people will put the deed into trust, and I see that sometimes there's a living trust and sometimes it just says trust. Not 100% sure of how those differences play out. So we'll start with talking about that.
Okay. So a living trust, a revocable trust, or just a trust, they're all the same. I went to a class once, and the person who was teaching us said, in the trust world, we have many words for the same thing. And he said, whenever there's a word that we don't have, we just make it up. And that's pretty much what we do. So there are a lot of words in the trust world that mean the same thing. What you really need to know is the difference between a revocable trust and a irrevocable trust.
Okay.
So most people will draft a trust for themselves, and they will deed their home into the trust, and they are their own trustee. And they leave it revocable so they can change it whenever they want. So say today I'm in love with my best friend, and I put this person in, and then the next day I fall out of love and I want to remove them. And you can do that. You can change your trust as much as you want. Upon death, your trust becomes legally irrevocable, meaning whatever it was on the date of your death, it's done. And that's what will take precedent over your assets. So you can draft an irrevocable trust while still living. That just means that whatever you put into that trust can't come out, can't be changed. So there are certain situations where that does become important, but I think that might be a little too high level for this conversation. But that's really the only difference.
Okay. So following up with that, so would it be wise then, let's say, because the problem that I do see with people that want to do quitclaim is if there's a senior citizen and they want to put their name on there because they assume that they'll be passing away at some point soon, would it be wise to do the irrevocable trust at that point? Would that be one of those cases?
You could, because a lot of times people will say, you can take your assets through the will process, through probate court, or you can put them in a trust and then you bypass that whole situation, the whole probate court situation. But if you really want something that's will solidify the actions that you really want to happen, the best thing to do is to create a trust. You'd have to go to your attorney, create the trust, deed your home into the trust, and then the trust will then determine inside the trust whatever you want. So then you just have the attorney draft, I want my house to go to my children, or I want my home to be sold, or I want my home to be gifted to an organization. So it's really, it works much like a will, but without having to go through the probate court.
And that's one of the points that I wanted to make sure that people understood, was that people are on the assumption that a will, you write it in a will and that does everything. However, they don't realize that it doesn't stop it from going to probate court,
Absolutely.
which chews up proceeds, and it takes a lot of time.
So when you can give anything you want to somebody, including your home, via a will. But the process has to be followed in order for that person to be able to legally take claim of that. You have to have a personal representative, which the old term is executor or executrix. Those terms are old. So you would have a personal representative. It could be a corporate trustee or personal representative. It can be an individual, it can be an attorney, whatever you want. But you have to then value that home. It goes into the probate court, and your attorney's charging you a fee, or your corporate trustee is charging you a fee, or both. And then the probate court here in Washtenaw County takes 1% of whatever those assets are. So you're also paying the court for the court fee. And it can be a lengthy process and it can be a short process. It really depends on the people involved. Is it sticky? Are there people who are going to contest it? It all depends. So having a trust, deeding it into the trust, and then what will happen is the trustee will take all the assets, including the home. It will then turn around and say, oh, I want my daughter to have my home. Then we would simply have an attorney draft a trustee's deed and then deed it over to that individual outside of the probate court.
So in essence, it depends on what your wishes are while you're alive and what you want to see happen after you pass, as far as which way you would go.
Absolutely. And that's a conversation you would have with your attorney. Your attorney will sit down with you and say, okay, what are your assets? What do you want to do with these? Who do you want to have them? Who do you want to be your successor trustee? In court, you should know that your trust can also be challenged. But most judges, especially here in Washtenaw County, it takes a lot to overturn the person's wishes in a trust, because the probate judges here are very specific and say it's grantor intent. And if they took the time to write this, to have this drafted, if they took the time to deed properties into the trust, then that is their intent. And that was exactly what they intended. And I've been in court where it's been challenged, and I've not seen it overruled once.
Okay, so then the question I have is, when it comes to the trust and developing that, you've mentioned that the attorney drafts it. So if a person goes to the bank doesn't draft it, the attorney drafts it. So where does the bank come in at that point?
So where the bank comes in is for a couple of different reasons. Some people want family members to be their successor trustee. But the problem with that is they don't have the knowledge or the expertise to do it. So it's going to take a longer time to get things done because they're learning the process. So sometimes an attorney will say, why don't you have a corporate trustee or a bank, corporate, take on that ability, because they can do it faster. We've got teams of people who do it all the time and more efficiently. The other reason you might have us is if you want to keep your family as a family, and I say this to a lot of people because they'll say to me, oh, my kids can do it. They are, perfectly fine with each other and they'll do the right thing. Well, 9 times out of 10, they don't do the right thing, or somebody gets upset, or at the end of the day, they're no longer a family because mom made you the trustee and now I'm angry because she didn't trust me. So it creates a lot of inter-family relationship issues. So then we get named. Or if you don't have anybody, some people just don't have any children or anybody that they feel can do the job for them. The other thing is, I always tell clients when they say, oh, my best friend's going to do this for me. And then my response is, but your best friend is aging along with you. And that's fine. I'm sure that he or she would do a fine job, but you're putting a lot of pressure on somebody who is, if you die when you're 80 and your best friend is 80, that's putting a lot of pressure on that person.
Right.
So at the end of the day, do you really want to have your best friend do it?
And let's face it, friends break up. They may not be your best friend in 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, possibly.
They could move away. They could pass away. A lot of things. I actually know someone who put their 2 best friends as executor and over their health and a couple of different
Healthcare, POA.
And out of those 2, they fell out with one, and it was irrevocable. And so now there's someone who has care, custody, and control of your business, and you don't even talk to them anymore.
That's scary.
And it's playing out right now. They have people trying to contact the person to talk some sense into her and let her sign herself off, to let the actual owner have control of her own business, because they weren't sure if she was going to live. And so things turned out and she's still alive. Now she wants control of her life back. Can't have it.
And this person won't give it?
Yeah, that's what happens. You don't know what people are like until you get to the point like this. And the same is with family. Death changes people.
It does.
And squabbling over what they think they deserve because they had a better relationship makes it really messy. And so
it does. And it's important to think that if you do use a corporate trustee, we really don't have an emotional attachment to the situation. So we can take a step back and say, no, this is what the intent is. This is what the document says. And this is how it's going to happen. In your situation that's going on right now, that can be resolved, but it's going to take a trip to the court.
Yep.
And it's going to take a trip to in front of a judge saying, this was the intent, but this is no longer the case, and now it needs to be changed. And again, you're hiring an attorney, you're paying court fees, and the emotional duress that your individual must be feeling right now must be horrible.
It is. And unfortunately, the relationship that probably could have been rectified, I don't think it's possible at this point now. And if so, a long time off. But so those are the things that, as a realtor, I get calls because they figure that we know everything related to property, everything related to a home, and that includes trust accounts and deeds. And really, with realtors, we buy and sell property. We have an idea of how those things work, but we are not the professionals. And so I always try to guide my clients to the people that know, that do that, which are the professionals. So definitely would say contact an attorney and have that conversation, but not all attorneys are alike. I'll be interviewing a couple of attorneys as well. I did have an experience myself with an estate attorney that thought they were doing the family a favor by doing some things with the deed, and it didn't turn out to be the greatest. I would say deeding a property to 5 people is probably not the best idea. At least it wasn't for this group of people. So I would say you might want to have a couple of different conversations, find out which is going to work best for you. Definitely ask the questions of what's the fallout of this. Because unfortunately, they talk about Murphy and his law.
And I think a good point to make, and you said it, but I think to drive it home, when you're choosing an attorney, make sure you find an estate planning attorney. You want to make sure that this is what this individual does. And there are several great estate planning attorneys out there. Ask around, before you, and you can even interview a few of them to see who you really like, but make sure that that's what they do. I had a client, and I'm reading the trust document, and mom and dad are dead, and I'm going through it, and I'm reading this, and I look at the son of the decedents, and I said, this wasn't an attorney who practiced estate planning, was it? And he said, no, it was the tax attorney. I was like, oh, well, it shows. So you want to make sure you're hiring the experts who are continuously learning the laws, because these laws change constantly. Yeah. I mean, it sounds weird, but the laws are constantly changing because as things pop up, and they pop up a lot, then estate planning attorneys in the state of Michigan, they get together and they start making changes. So you want to make sure you're with somebody who is constantly staying up with those laws.
It's kind of like you wouldn't go to an eye doctor to fix your foot.
Absolutely.
Just because it's doctor. You wouldn't go to a gynecologist, because, you had a problem with your nose, so you should go with an attorney that specializes in that. Just like you should probably not try to sell your home by yourself. I'm just saying, I tried it, and I actually was a for sale by owner, but it was a bad experience for me and my husband. Yeah, we still had repercussions that followed us a year or so later with that whole event that almost got us into some legal trouble that we had no knowledge about until we got letters from Wayne County threatening us for things that we did not do. So you want to make sure you trust the professionals, those people who are actively doing it. And as Mitzi stated, laws change yearly, I want to say, and sometimes twice a year. And as of, right now during COVID, a lot of things transpired last year and laws are changing because of that. Even in the real estate market, they changed some laws for us as of last November. I just found out at a class 2 weeks ago that it's effective November 2020, last year.
Wow.
Yeah, and I just found out at a class 2 weeks ago. I'm glad that I took my class ahead of time instead of waiting until, later in the year. But those are things that happen, so you definitely want somebody who stays current, someone who is taking their classes and doing their updates, and someone who has their hands in it every day. So you definitely don't want a tax accountant to do that. You don't want a divorce attorney either to handle that, even though they may do some state settling, but not quite the same. So I think that's about all.
I think so.
So I thank you for joining us. Come back again. Again, we'll be talking about Lady Bird at some point, as my previous title person said, because she likes the name, which I still laugh at that every time. And then we'll be bringing more subjects just to help you make the better decisions for you and your family moving forward. Thanks again for your information. It's always a pleasure. And my twin and I will see you at some other later date. Have a great day.